sense. So I guess kind of tying that back into the case, so, you know, the child that's being involved, you know, he's not necessarily starting out, but he's probably growing the business. So, you know, he's probably wanting to ensure that he's got some help on the farm that can, you know, somewhat offset the knowledge that mom and dad have probably brought to that operation for a significant period of time. And, you know, just putting himself into place where he's able to, you know, continue to profit from the farm. Because at the same point in time, you know, as mom and dad transition out of the farm, they're expecting, you know, son to, you know, keep seeing some profit here to be able to kind of turn that around into their retirement. So just having a good understanding of where you're at, either at those very initial stages, or if you're kind of in this particular position, taking that business over, what are the things that you need to do to maybe replace the key employees or the key shareholders that are moving out?
Yeah, and depending on the business, this is where we can use insurance to cover that off, right?
Okay.
So if you are using our farm analogy or our farm case, our farm family, your ability to physically do the job is extremely important.
For sure.
Right? So if you, on the week before harvest, break your leg, that's going to make things fairly challenging, to say the least. So if there's two options there. You can have some form of insurance, whether that's a disability type insurance, some kind of insurance to have it so you have cash that you can pay someone to do the job that you can do in 6 or 8 weeks, but you can't do today.
Right.
Or you have to have cash to be able to do that.
Correct.
Right? So until the business gets to a place that you can self-insure, now we use the term self-insure on our world of when you can just take money out of the business or out of your personal to pay for it yourself, take that hit, or do you need to pay for insurance to pay for that, right? We all have homeowner insurance, vehicle insurance, right? For when that thing happens and you pay the deductible to get insurance to cover it. So it's similar.
Okay.
The other one, especially for non-farm businesses, but I would argue is equally as important for farm families and farm businesses, is if you have a partnership, so we'll take your accounting practice, you have partners. If something happens to one of your partners, they pass away suddenly, a lot of times if nothing's designated, their surviving spouse or partner is now your partner in the business. You may or may not like having that person come into the business. And not necessarily because they're a bad person,
Right.
but they are not a farmer.
Right.
They are not a trained accountant. They don't know how to weld anything if you have a welding business. So we can use insurance products to make sure that that business is not substantially hindered because a key person is no longer there. Whether something tragic has happened and they have passed away, whether it's something as simple as a broken bone or any kind of in between. Looking at those what ifs is really important because, well, life happens, right? Unfortunately, that there's the great years where everything ticks along and you grow at 50% or 100%, and then there's the years where something goes sideways.
Definitely.
So that can be a way to sort of mitigate some of those ebbs and flows, and that's something that we spend a lot of time looking at. I know we like to talk a lot about the financial planning from a positive standpoint, right? All the fun things, the retirements, the buying a home, post-secondary, but it's also making sure that there's enough flexibility for if something unfortunate happens, someone passes away, someone gets a critical illness, someone gets hurt, because our greatest asset is our ability to make money, our ability to do the job, to own the business, to provide the value, provide the service. So if you can't do that for any amount of time, we don't want that to make everything kind of blow up.
Perfect. makes sense. And like you say, you know, you might not want to have some of these discussions, but it makes sense to have them in advance, because once they happen, it's kind of hard to plan for a disability or a death in the operation. You're really scrambling at that point in time to try and piece things together. So planning for that worst case scenario before it ever happens is probably the prudent thing to do in any business.
It is, and it's really challenging because I like to use a vehicle because it seems less heartless than
Sure,
a human.
sure.
But you can't get hail insurance after your truck's been hailed,
That's a fair point.
right? Like they're not going to give it to you full
Right.
of dents. We're unfortunately
Sure.
not any different. If you've
Right.
gotten a diagnosis and become very ill,
Right.
you can't get insurance anymore. So it is unfortunately one of those things that you have to look at when you don't need it,
Right.
which is just the less fun part of the job.
Fair enough.